LA's first primetime news, the 8 o'clock news.
Edwin Meese turned in his resignation as Attorney General today. Meese made the surprise announcement within hours after an independent prosecutor concluded he did not have enough evidence to prosecute the Attorney General. Mr. Meese said that conclusion completely vindicated him. He added he will leave office in late July or early August. Do you ever feel underpaid and overworked? Well, our consumer editor, Russ Nichols, has a solution for you coming up next. Some sunny skies ahead for your weekend. Andrew Amador will be along to tell you about that. And then Sandy Newton reviews a new comedy starring those funny ladies, Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin. Stay tuned.
Live from the nation's capital, BizNet and ESPN present Nation's Business Today for Thursday, July 16th, 1987.
Warren, the market bounced around like a balloon full of buttermilk yesterday. The boogeyman that popped out of the box just as the trading was about to begin was the trade deficit figure for the month of May. What Wall Street was expecting was about $11 billion, less than the month of April. And so that was factored into investors' positions the day before, driving almost all the indexes to record highs. But what Wall Street got was $14.4 billion, more than $1 billion higher than April, perhaps setting the stage for yet another all-time record annual trade deficit when all the figures are in after the end of the year. The Saga deal saw Marriott sell off the less profitable restaurant divisions of the company it acquired, making the fit all the more attractive to Wall Street. The Marriott Corporation has come a long way from its humble beginnings as a root beer stand back in 1927 to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise today, doubling in size and profit every 5 years. For the Corporate Report, I'm Bruce Page, Nation's Business Today.
Coming next, Bruce Page with the Investors Report.
Warren, somebody like Kenny Rogers used to say, you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. And investors who play the Wall Street game most vigorously make a lot of their decisions on projections. And with so much talk on the street about trade deficit figures for the latest reported month, sure to be much less than the previous month, holding them, that is their stock purchases, made the most sense. But when that street talk proved invalid, the trade deficit figure more than $3 billion higher than expected, folding them was the only way to go. Millions of Americans have had money from checks they've deposited withheld for 10 days or even longer. In most cases, your bank receives that money in less than 3 days. But don't expect to be able to get out-of-state or out-of-town checks cashed any sooner in most states for a long time to come. But it's not been a priority for senators, and with Election Day for many of them just 2 weeks away, and their campaigning at least 2 weeks overdue, they weren't about to legislate change this year. Matter of fact, don't expect change until about 1990. Even the House proposal wouldn't have implemented anything until 3 years after a bill becomes law. It's quite a lot different than shooting at the White House. A lot of people don't understand that this is the Federal Reserve, so we have to come out of a wide shot here. Roam the streets of Washington as a reporter for a few years, and you pick up a lot of knowledge, many contacts. And testing, I guess I'll be talking about this level. More. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You get some sun on him there, Kerry?
Okay.
Turn a little bit.
That knowledge, those contacts, prove invaluable no matter what city you anchor in. Especially invaluable when crisis strikes and you know all the bases from the Federal Reserve to Capitol Hill to get the story. For example, the Budget Deficit Summit following Black Monday, 1988.
Our financial reporter Bruce Page in a live report from the Capitol says harmony among all the participants seems to be more promising. Bruce.
Tom, you'd be more conscious of that harmony if you'd heard the sniping discord as reporters did who covered this summit, each side accusing the other of coming to the table with preconditions. No question it's still politics as usual, but the sniping does seem to be behind them now. Republican congressional leaders met with President Reagan early Friday to put some finishing touches to a package that would secure the support of both parties at the budget summit on the 10th day of negotiations. House Minority Leader Bob Michel presented a plan to cut $30 billion from the deficit this year, $45 billion more next year. Representatives from both parties reacted positively to it.
I feel that we have made progress, and I am hopeful that that progress will continue.
This is a bold stroke. It is the answer to the problem. It may not be, to the point where we're really ready to cross the last T and sign off on it, but we're within striking distance.
Even impressing Democrats who earlier in the week had complained of President Reagan's apparent non-involvement and non-interest.
And they said this is a Republican leadership package. The president is well aware of it. While it doesn't bear his name, it bears at least his blessing.
Although negotiators see no conclusion to their summit before at least next Friday, the tone has improved decidedly from the partisan bickering of previous days. The pressure of a falling stock market is temporarily removed. The Dow lost only about 34 points overall for the week. Friday down 26, closing at 1959. The lower interest rates of the past week should help calm the clamor politicians are hearing from constituents. And the lower dollar of the past week should help to take a little of the fever out of the drive for protectionism. But the stakes are far bigger on Capitol Hill than settling markets and reining in Congress's overdrawn allowance.
And so what you're really seeing emerge here this season in Congress is the framing of the issues that will become the debating issues for next year's election.
Tom and Wendy, the more that we dig into this financial calamity of '87, the more we find its origin here in Washington, not in New York, as so many people think.
Bruce, you say the congressman said they are making some progress, but are they feeling any pressure because of all the problems on Wall Street?
They're not so much conscious of the pressure from Wall Street. Wall Street may cry tears now, but for 3 years the Dow has been going up, has tripled in size, and of course the budget deficit has tripled in size in that same period. They seem to be more concerned about their constituents, but still the very bottom line, quite frankly, Tom, is political power. This is coming into an election year, and both sides do want to gain that White House. The Democrats, of course, have the House and the Senate, and they'd like to have the White House.
Okay, thank you very much. Bruce Page reporting from a week in Washington.
You covered the outside world over 15 years, from Havana to Moscow to Ottawa, and you have invaluable perspective to share with your audience. For example, Castro and Trudeau added another side to the story of the then crisis in Angola.
We cannot do anything fair than to help the Angolan people.
I certainly came out of the talk with a much greater knowledge of the assessment of the African situation viewed from the particular socialist point of view of Premier Castro, and I hope that he also benefited from some of the ideas and arguments that I put forth.
Here, the fresh air of glasnost was beginning to be shown by Russian leaders to Canadians, although the breeze then, 1979, was all too slight. In the modern world, trade and politics go together. We're trying to build up a new and profitable and peaceful relationship with the Soviet Union on all fronts. Canadian businessmen are enthusiastic about cracking the market, but they're finding it very difficult to do so.
Lonnie Lardner, Bruce Page, LA's Primetime News, the 9 o'clock news.
Good evening, I'm Bruce Page.
And I'm Lonnie Lardner.
It was like Clark Kent beating up Superman. Who would have thought we could do it? Who thought the Dodgers could beat up the mighty A's? But they did it again tonight to win the World Series. The game, 5-2. The series, 4-1. Steve Rowe will have more later in our newscast. The mighty effort to save the mighty whales trapped in the Alaska ice may not be enough. The helicopter-towed icebreaker isn't scheduled to arrive until tomorrow at the earliest. The whales are sick, cut up by the sharp ice, and running out of air. And now marauding polar bears are closing in on the smell of blood. Even rescuers don't know if it's worth it anymore.
I don't think they have much of a chance.
A jewelry store holdup attempt in downtown Los Angeles has left 1 man dead and 2 others wounded. Police say that 4 male suspects held up the store in Koreatown and started shooting. 2 men and then 1 woman in the store were wounded. 1 man died at County USC Medical Center. The incident took place around 4 p.m. this afternoon. Police say the suspects are still at large and have no idea what the robbers took from the store. It's not sure what prompted the shootings, and anyone with information on the incident is asked to contact the LAPD Rampart Division. Well, nobody gave them much of a chance in the playoffs, but that only seemed to inspire the Dodgers all that much more. Did anybody anticipate this?
I don't think so. In fact, the Dodgers finished so poorly last year that in the last 2 years that no one, absolutely no one, thought the Dodgers could do it. But they did. They actually did. What more can be said? The Dodgers did it. All right, Scotty, thank you very much. Now the Dodgers fly home tonight around 12:30. No one knows the location for security reasons, but the Dodgers are going to be one happy bunch coming back here.
And you're going to be the guy in the front row of the parade tomorrow, right?
Indeed. Yes,
okay.
I will.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Okay, Bruce.
Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back again at the same time tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Hope you'll join us then. I'm Bruce Page.
Good night. I'm Lonnie Lardner.
Tom and Wendy, it's hard to imagine anyone better to guide you than the host of Wall Street Week for almost 20 years. Lou Rukeyser has transformed the dismal science of economics into an entertaining, ever-unfolding saga, and he's just written another chapter. No subject in America is the object of so much uninformed bombast as the state of business and the economy, with the possible exceptions of sex and baseball. So says Lou Rukeyser. And it's that kind of irreverent observation that has made him a nationally known personality. Further enforcing that is this just published 700-page business almanac, everything you'd want to know about American business.
Half the book, as you know, is devoted to individual industries, who the players are, where the jobs are, what the prospects are, where the trends are.
If you think the book is all serious, it's not. It's full of trivia. Take, for example, in 1904, when an ice cream maker ran out of dishes to serve it in, one of his neighbors, a pastry maker, whipped up one of these. It became the cone. We've been using them ever since. More practically within these pages, you'll find an entertaining interpretation of our tax system.
Don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax that fellow behind the tree. So we all like to think that if only the other guy paid more, we could pay less.
Ever wonder if America's rich are smarter or just work harder? It's also in the book, but here's a taste.
Many of them made it the old-fashioned way. They inherited it. Well, I don't know how smart you have to be born into the right home. I don't think that's a great show of IQ. But for most Americans, most of the time, the way to get rich slow has been to hang on to shares of the best companies in the country and not be scared away every time the market has a blip. I do agree with you that most ordinary people have been scared out of the stock market. I think it's a shame because those who held on last October now see their holdings up about 25%.
As to whether the market will continue in that direction, well, even Rukeyser had to admit only the elves know for sure. As for stock market action today, the Dow gained ground, adding 13 1/3 points, closing at 2110.60. Every payday, part of your paycheck ends up here in Washington. The tax reform law of 1986 hasn't changed that. What were Americans wanting and expecting?
Taxes are very, very unfair. They favor the wealthy at the expense of the middle class, and the poor are supposed to be taken care of.
I think it's a little high, and it doesn't necessarily reward people for working harder or getting ahead.
The more we make, the more gets taken out. We can't get ahead.
If that's what we wanted, what did we get? Well, where we were was 15 tax brackets. Lowest ranking category pays up 11% of income, highest 50%. The more you make, the higher the premium. Where we're headed in 87 is just 5 tax brackets. 11% still the lowest rank of taxpayers, then 15, 28, 35, and 38.5. No more 50%. What money that scaling down saves us has to come from somewhere, so merchants must pick up the slack. But bet your bottom dollar won't be long before we pay what they pay as their prices rise. In the meantime,
if one does a tabulation of who gains, who loses, and who ends up pretty much in the same position, then it turns out that out of middle-income tax filers, let's call them people with incomes of $30,000 to $40,000 a year, about 7 out of 8 are going to have either lower tax bills or pretty much the same tax bill.
Question is then, how much lower?
It's not going to be enough to help them buy a new car, let us say, but it may be enough to pay for a color television set.
Now, maybe this is what you had in mind, courtesy of the IRS. But let's get real here. When was the last time you can ever remember the revenuers being so generous? Chances are we're really talking itty-bitty when you get right down to the nitty-gritty. If we didn't get a lot of money, did we get what President Reagan told us he wanted in a State of the Union address?
Let us move together with an historic reform of tax simplification for fairness and growth.
Tax simplification we did not get, but consider the journey tax reform had to go through to become law. What the president had in mind went to the House of Representatives. 435 people and politicians all, each pushing their own ideas for tax reform. What was negotiated and compromised there moved on to the Senate. Another 100 powerful voices added to the din, and dozens of lobbying groups everywhere clamoring for protection. Then to joint committee resolution of House and Senate, and many months and debates later, back to the Oval Office for signature. Tax complication seems more the end result. Where you'll notice it first is in your W-4. You know, that form that you file with your employer